入台心灵深处，拥抱着一个渴望，我们的眼睛朝向东方，远远地眺望西岸山。我们不 向东方，远远地眺望西岸山。我们不会失去2000年的希望，在自己国土做个自由民族，住在西安和耶路撒冷，在自己国土做个自由民族，住在西安和耶路撒冷。我们不会失去2000年的希望，在自己国土做个自由民族，住在西安和耶路撒冷，在自己国土做个自由民族，住在西安和耶路撒冷。Many nights we've prayed with no proof anyone could hear. In our hearts a hopeful song we barely understood. Now we are not afraid, although we know there's much to fear. We were moving mountains long before we knew we could. There can be miracles when you believe. Though hope is rare, it's hard to cure. Who knows what miracles you can achieve? When you believe, somehow you will. You will when you believe. In this time of fear, when prayer so often proved in vain, hope seemed like a summer bird too swiftly flown away. Yet now I'm standing here with heart so full I can't explain, speaking faith and speaking words I never thought I'd say. There can be miracles when you believe. Though hope is rare, it's hard to care. Who knows what miracles you can achieve? When you believe, somehow you will. You will when you
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im weekly Torah study, broadcasting live from the Golan Heights in Israel. And we have a wonderful study ahead for you. Very interesting study, I think, as I hope they all are. We're going to be continuing in the book of Zechariah. We're up to chapter 5. We're going to learn about flying scrolls and other interesting things. And then we're going to dig into Leviticus chapter 25, which is actually, I don't know why, but it's one of my favorite chapters in Leviticus. It's very interesting. We're going to talk about the Seventh Agricultural Year, the Sabbath year, the Sabbath Agricultural Year, and the Jubilee year. We get to it this week. If not, we'll do it next week. And we're going to start off with a little bit of biblical archaeology, which we'll get to in a second. And other than that, here we are. So we now have weekly meetings. We now have weekly World Alliance of Qara'im meetings here in the Golan Heights. And slowly but surely, the group is growing. And we hope to expand it and do other types of meetings and eventually open up a study center, a World Alliance of Qara'im study center here in the Golan Heights, and we have a whole bunch of other plans. So thank you for being part of that. In terms of the war, things have been quiet here, at least in the north, at least in the Golan Heights for the past couple of days. I haven't checked the news today, so I don't know what's been going on in the center of the country or the south of the country, but here, at least in this part of the north of the country, it has been relatively quiet today. We had an alert at about 5 in the morning, but I actually slept through it, which I never do. Somehow or another, I did not even hear it on the phone. But the alerts are, they're not the air raid sirens. The alerts usually, if the missiles are coming from Iran, so the alerts will go off about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes before the air raid sirens. And then once the army or the home front determines where exactly the missiles are going to, or hopefully not land, be shot down, but where they're heading towards, then in those particular areas, about 10 or 15 minutes later, they'll sound the air raid sirens, and that's when we go into the mamad, into the protected area. At any rate, so we'll see what happens. I don't know. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't know how well this war is actually going. I don't know where it's going to head. I unfortunately seem to agree a lot more with some of the critics of Israel. Not because I myself am necessarily critical of Israel. I'm critical about some things that Israel does, but because I think they kind of have understood the situation a little bit more clearly. I think the supporters of Israel here in Israel and outside of Israel are a bit too overly optimistic with the situation. But take a person like Professor Mearsheimer, if you've heard him talk online, which some people think he's an anti-Semite, and he may very well be. But I think that he doesn't come across that way, quite frankly. But I think his analysis of the war is kind of spot on, and that's that the United States has gotten itself into a bit of a quagmire with Israel and is now looking for an off ramp. And the Iranians don't really want to give the United States and Trump an off ramp. And who knows where it's all going to go. But I'm not too optimistic about the way things are heading. I don't see any regime change happening in Iran. I don't think it's going to happen. I didn't think it was going to happen from the beginning. I thought it was a pipe dream. I think, Donald Trump was I love Donald Trump, don't get me wrong, but I think he was a bit high on his own supply, as they say. And he had just come off the easy victory in Venezuela and thought he was just going to walk into Iran. It was going to be kind of a cakewalk. And it's turned out not to be. So who knows where this is all heading? I personally think, if you ask me, that this is kind of the opening shots of what we might call World War III, what we might call the end of days war. And I am not one to kind of just say everything's the end of days. When I first came to Israel, I saw a lot of kind of end of days and messianic fervor, and there's still a lot of it. But I think that I'm kind of careful not to get sucked up into that. But I really think here there's a possibility that this is going to expand over time, maybe not immediately, into something much greater. And then this could end up being an end of days war. And what better book to study regarding the end of days than the book of Zechariah? When we get to the later chapters of Zechariah, we're going to see a bunch of end of days prophecies. So we'll let Zechariah speak for itself. And other than that, yeah, we'll have to see what happens. I don't think it's going to go as well as Israel and the United States hope and plan, but we'll see what happens. At any rate, you guys can all watch plenty of pundits on the internet. You don't need me to be another pundit. But I've been a bit skeptical from the beginning that it was just going to be a cakewalk and the Shabbat Shalom, and that the regime was going to be overthrown. The Iranian regime was just going to be overthrown, spontaneously, that the people were going to rise up, and then there was just going to be this new Middle East full of peace and love and prosperity. Something didn't make sense to me about that from day one, if for no other reason that I don't think that this can happen on a global scale. I don't think Israel can be at peace until we solve our own internal problems, which, of course, in my eyes means casting off the two false philosophies of a Western culture and rabbinical Judaism, and returning to the true Torah, which is, of course, Karaitism, or Karaite-leaning Torah. Chosrim b'Tanach is the name of the other name of this movement, of the World Alliance of Qara'im movement, which means returning to the Tanakh. So Israel can't be at peace. The people of Israel can't really be at peace until we are doing what we're supposed to be doing. And as long as we're stuck in this sick cult of rabbinical Judaism, and as long as we are a vassal state of the West, which is becoming more and more decadent, more and more depraved, although I guess Trump and the right are trying to turn that around somewhat, but still a long way to go. But we certainly can't be a vassal state to the West. And as long as we are following these two false philosophies of Western culture and rabbinical Judaism, then I don't see any way that there can be peace, prosperity, Shangri-La, a new Middle East and all of that nonsense. And so I think that I don't speak in the name of Yahweh. I'm not a prophet, but I think that he is dragging the United States into this quagmire in order to kick off World War III / the end of days war. Although, don't quote me on it. I've given many predictions in the past where I've been wrong. I've given many where I've been right. So this is just my opinion. It's not a cut and dried prediction. No, I'm kind of solid on this one, to be 100% honest. At any rate, we will see what happens. I think one thing that's definitely going to happen, and I think, again, this Professor Mearsheimer has pointed this out, and I think he's spot on, and I've been saying this kind of for years, that the Iran war if it continues to go not well for the United States, it's going to cause an exponential increase in anti-Semitism in the United States. So already, Americans are already pissed off at the Jews for various reasons, pissed off at the Jewish people living there, at us. I don't live there, thank God. But the Iran war is perceived, and correctly so, I may say, as a war that basically Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, suckered Donald Trump into getting into against the best interests of his country, the United States of America. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think there's a lot of truth to the fact that Trump has people who are very sympathetic towards Israel, speaking into his ear, such as his son-in-law, whose face I can't even stand to look at on the television, Jared Kushner. God, pretty boy Ken doll Kushner. I can't even stand looking at his face. But then there are others as well. We don't have to get into all of it. But let's put it this way. There are a lot of very pro-Israel people who I think convinced Trump that it was in the best interest of the United States to get into this war. And really, it's not in the United States', it's not in America's best interest. It's really much more in Israel's best interest for the United States to come protect Israel. So that being said, since Israel is at this point in time a vassal state of the United States of America, it is, one could claim, well, the overlords, the head of the empire, meaning the United States of America, has an obligation to protect its vassal states against its enemies. So in that sense, we could claim that the United States is acting correctly in protecting Israel, since it is a de facto vassal state of the United States of America. But nonetheless, this is, if it continues to go in the wrong direction, which I think it will be, it's going to cause a great amount or a great increase in anti-Semitism, to the point that I think you're going to see things like pogroms, Kristallnachts. Who even knows where it's going to go? It could end up with expulsion of all of the Jews from the United States of America. I think it will actually, at some point. It could end up even worse. It could end up with the concentration camps and stuff like that. I don't know if it's going to go that far. But I think the time for the Jews in the United States of America is very limited at this point. This is something I've been saying for a while now, and it seems to be coming true. Now, remember that the last large concentration of Jews outside of Israel in the entire world is the United States of America, specifically New York, or for the most part New York, but the United States of America in general. In fact, so Israel now has, I think the number is 7 or 8 million Jews. The next largest amount of Jews is the United States, which I think has 6 million Jews, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that one. I think that's correct. And the third largest country, why am I talking? Let's ask Mr. ChatGPT or one of these other. Okay. What countries have the most Jews? Let's get a list. Okay, so Israel has between 7 and 8 million Jews. So say 7.5 million Jews. The United States has about 7 million Jews. And the third is France with 400,000 Jews, 450,000 Jews. So we go from 7 million in Israel, 6 million or 7 million in the 7.5 million in Israel, 7 million in the United States, and then 450,000 in France. Then Canada with 400,000, the United Kingdom with 300,000, Argentina with 180,000, Russia with 150,000, Germany with 125,000, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the only very large population of Jews outside of Israel is the United States. It's the last concentration of Jews outside of Israel. And that, of course, has to end at some point in time. All of the Jews, we have prophecies that the Jews will be ingathered from the four corners of the earth. And we know that they have essentially been ingathered from almost all of the countries that they had large populations in. I can just give two examples, two countries that I've been to. Morocco had 250,000 Jews before the declaration of the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel in 1948. Within a couple of years after that, almost all of the Moroccan Jews left, and now there were 3,000 Jews left in Morocco. Tunisia had 100,000 Jews before the foundation of the founding of the State of Israel, and now has 1,000 Jews. I've been to Tunisia in 2018. That was a very interesting place to visit. Enjoyed it there very much. But 1,000 Jews left, mostly in the main city of Tunis, in the capital of Tunis, and then in the island of Djerba, towards the south of the country near the border with Libya. France, I don't know how many they had, but a lot more than 500,000. We know what happened with Spain and Portugal. I don't know what the population was before 1492, before the expulsion from Spain. That was the year that the Jews were expelled from Spain. But it was certainly a lot more than it is now, even though, of course, Jews have been trickling back into Europe. The point being that the Jews have been evacuated out of almost every country that they lived in: Iraq, Syria, Iran. Actually, believe it or not, the Muslim country with the largest population of Jews is Iran. And let me just confirm that. What Muslim countries have the most Jews? Let's get a list here. So now Turkey apparently has surpassed Iran. So Turkey, 10 to 15,000 Jews. Iran, with around 10,000 Jews. Morocco, this one says 100,000 to 200,000. Tunisia, small community remains, largely centered on the island of Djerba. We said that. So there we go. Turkey, Iran. So Iran is the second largest population of Jews in a Muslim country. So the basic bottom line is the Jews have been cleared out of just about every country, meaning that these end of days prophecies have already come true, aside from one country, and that's the United States of America. So the only large Jewish population in the world outside of Israel is the United States of America. And so just like it ended in every other country, that must end in the United States of America. How it's going to end, when it's going to end, I can't give you the details, but I think it's very, very reasonable to think that if this war with Iran continues to go in the wrong direction, which I think it will, then this might signal the end of the Jews in the United States of America. This might touch off such a growth in anti-Semitism in the United States of America that it will lead to the expulsion or perhaps the killing, pogroms, maybe mass killing like in Germany, of the Jews. And remember, Trump is not always going to be in power. Trump is definitely a friend of the Jews, although he gets pissed off with us sometimes, but his daughter is Jewish by conversion. His grandkids, meaning the children of Jared Pretty Boy Kushner and Ivanka Trump, are Jewish by Karaite biblical standards, since Jared Kushner is born Jewish. And so Trump has Jewish grandkids, and he's obviously very pro-Jewish, very pro-Israel. But Trump is not always going to be in power. Who knows what's going to happen in the midterm elections, and who knows what's going to happen in 2028. It's very possible that people will be so fed up with with Trump and MAGA, especially if things continue to go bad with the war, and this touches off increases in gas prices and other economic problems. I mean, the United States is already teetering on the edge, right? And American society is already teetering on the edge and has been for a while. That's why when the pandemic struck in 2020, I got the heck out of there and went to Portugal, and then ended up spending 4 years in Portugal, which was a very nice and interesting experience overall. And so yeah, if American society and the economy, which is already teetering on the edge and has really been teetering on the edge for 50 years now, getting progressively worse, continues to get worse to the point where people can't make rent, can't afford food, can't live their lives, which they already pretty much can't, but this might push them over the edge. This might be the tipping point. Then if this tipping point occurs because of the Iran war, which is perceived by many Americans to be a result of America fighting not for its own interests, but for the interests of Israel, then this, of course, could unleash anti-Semitism on a level that we've never seen before. And then if Trump is already a lame duck president or out of office in 2028, I actually hope he finds a way to stay in office past 2028, whatever he has to do. I love Trump. But assuming he doesn't, and then we get a left-winger's backlash for all of the problems in the United States, and then we get someone from the new left, such as a AOC or a Mamdani. Well, I guess Mamdani can't run, but that type of person, then the Jews are in super, super big trouble. They are screwed, and they don't even realize it. So they're trying to, basically the Jews in the United States are not trying to protect their asses right now, trying to keep a real low profile, turning on Israel because, to try to show the Americans that they're real Americans, that they support America and not Israel, that Israel, they can read the writing on the wall. That's from the book of Daniel, by the way. And so, yeah, I think things are going to go really bad. That's what I think. I think things are going to go pretty bad with this war in Iran. I think it's going to touch off a global economic crisis, which is going to affect the United States. I think it might push the United States over the edge economically and socially. Then we have Trump falling out of office one way or another, becoming a lame duck in 2026 or after the 2026 midterm elections or in 2028. The rise of a left-winger who hates the Jews, right? Because all of these left-wing types like Mamdani, AOC, Ilhan Omar, they all hate the Jews. And then Americans who can't pay their rent, who already can't pay their rent, who can't pay their mortgages, who can't put food on the table, have to work 3 jobs and can't even get those 3 jobs. Then they all turn on the Jews, and then we get pogroms, Kristallnachts, ultimately orders of expulsion, Nuremberg type laws, and maybe even concentration camps. A good friend of mine pointed out that ICE, which is now being used to deport illegal immigrants, can just as easily, once that structure is set up where you have detention centers, immigration courts, tons of ICE officers, that could easily be used down the road to round up the Jews, send them to detention centers, and then do whatever is the next step, expel them from the United States. Most likely expel them from the United States. I don't think it's going to get to the point in the United States, although I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong that it did in Germany and the surrounding nations, but I think it's much more likely that there'll be an expulsion like there was in Spain in 1492, in England in whatever it was, the 1500s or something like that. There've been a bunch of expulsions. But at any rate, so the Jews' time in the United States, I think, is extremely limited. The war in Iran is definitely not going in the direction. So Trump thought he was just going to walk in there and it was just going to be a giant cakewalk. He thought he was just going to declare that it's all going to be over in 3 days, and that means that it will be over in 3 days. Again, I think Trump, who I love very much, can get a little bit high on his own supply. He thinks that he just declares something, just like he did with the Ukrainian war, right? Remember, before he got into office, he said the war was going to end in 24 hours, within 24 hours after he got into office. That, of course, did not happen. It's now been, 2 years? What are we up to? 2024, 2025. So one and something years, and that war is still raging, of course. And Trump, who loves his country, loves the United States, but is still living 70 years ago in his mind, thinks that the United States is so powerful that all he has to do is declare something, and that means it's going to come true. So all he has to do is declare that the Ukraine war is over, and boom, the Ukraine war is over. All he has to do is declare that Iran will unconditionally surrender, or that the people in the streets of Tehran will rise up against the regime, and boom, that's supposed to automatically happen. Trump thinks the United States is so powerful that all he has to do is decree something, and that means it's going to happen. Well, that didn't happen in Ukraine. It's certainly not happening in Iran. I didn't think it was going to happen in Iran. I thought the whole thing was BS from day one. I didn't think the people were going to rise up, because they've risen up in the past. They've risen up in the past. They rose up before the American came in and bombed the heck out of them, and that didn't overthrow the regime. Even though the previous Ayatollah was killed, that didn't overthrow the regime. Even though a whole bunch of other people in the leadership of the regime have been killed, maybe even the Ayatollah's son. We have no idea what's happening with him. Well, the regime seems pretty much intact. And another thing, and I also pointed this out before not here, but to friends here before this current war with Iran started, is that bombing the heck out of Iran is not going to weaken the regime. It actually strengthens the regime, because when you, as much as you may hate your country or your government, when a foreign country comes and bombs the heck out of your country, then that's going to naturally make you loyal to that government. Imagine if, let's say, a hideous president like Kamala Camel Face Harris had gotten into the White House and everybody couldn't stand her, or a lot of people couldn't stand her. But if Russia started bombing the United States, suddenly we'd see everyone is suddenly has some kind of loyalty towards the government of the United States or towards the Camel Face Harris, right? Thank God you didn't get in. So it's actually counterproductive to go bomb the heck out of a country. It makes people more loyal to the leadership, not less loyal to the leadership. And that's what we've seen. The Iranian government seems to be in very clear control, or very, still very much in control over their own people. There doesn't seem to be any sign of uprising on the streets. So now they're saying they're going to arm the Kurds, they're going to arm other militias. Well, that ain't going to happen. Or if it does happen, it ain't going to happen so quick. That's for sure. And so that's plan B. So plan B doesn't seem to be working out at all. I don't know what plan C is. Trump is saying, I think Trump is basically looking for a way out. I think he's had enough. I think he's realized at this point, I think he wants to try a bit more to bomb the bejesus out of them and see if maybe that will get somewhere. But if it doesn't, then I think he's going to say that he's had enough. He's going to realize that this is helping Israel, but not helping the United States, and certainly not helping his midterm prospects, and certainly not helping the gas prices and the prices of food, because apparently much of the fertilizer of the world goes to the Straits of Hormuz, and so on and so forth. So it's just a giant quagmire, which is going to just already the people in the United States, the Goyim in the United States, are fed up with the Jews, and this is just going to cause that to rise exponentially. It's going to cause the end of the Jewish experiment in the United States, the end of the Jewish Shihiyah, how do you say that in English? The end of the Jewish settlement in the United States, which has lasted, I guess, approximately, I guess you could date it maybe to 1850 or 1875. So let's say 1875 to 2025, that's 150 years. It's a good run. It's a pretty good run, 150 years. But that's all going to come to an end, I think, within the next, well, I did a video a couple of months ago saying 10 years, but I think I might have to revise my estimate down to about 3 years, if even, but let's keep it at 10 years. But that's where we're heading, people. That's where we're heading. We're heading to, we have a quagmire in Iran. We have a war that Bibi goaded the United States into. Americans are sick and tired of it. They don't want unnecessary wars. They don't want forever wars. They don't want regime change. They don't want to get involved in the Middle East, especially when it doesn't seem to be benefiting the United States of America directly. So yeah, I'm just repeating myself at this point. Anyway, that's where I think it's all heading. I don't think it's the end of the Iran war. I think it's just the beginning, and I think this is going to lead to more countries being dragged in, and to World War III, if you want to call it that, or the end of days war. And it's good that we're studying the book of Zechariah, because we're going to see some end of days prophecies when we get towards the end of the book of Zechariah. Okay, that's what I got for my rant today. And no, I am obviously not an anti-Semite. I'm Jewish and I live in Israel, but I have to point out the truth when I see it. And again, the only salvation for the people of Israel, the only salvation ultimately for the world, is for Israel to cast off the two foreign philosophies of rabbinical Judaism and Western culture. And until we do that, things are just going to spiral down. And this might be what we're seeing here. Okay, let's put on a song, and then we will start learning the book of Zechariah. Actually, we're going to do a little bit of biblical archaeology first. And then once we're done with somebody agrees with me, but I know that I don't know, because I have no idea who you are. The point, what is this? The point in the heart? Okay, you'll identify yourself to me privately, maybe, and then I'll know that okay, I have a feeling I know who it might be. Anywho, All right, let me put on a song, get things set up, and then we will go into a bit of biblical archaeology, and then we will go into the book of Zechariah. Just give me a second here. Hey, we are back. We're back. So we're going to dig into the book of Zechariah, the book of Zechariah. But before we do, let's just talk a little bit about biblical archaeology. So we want to talk about something called let's bring it up here for a second. I already bring it up. Yes. The Merneptah stele. Okay, so I think it's important. Some of these, and by the way, there are plenty of excellent biblical archaeology resources online, and there are even magazines. There's one magazine that I get that's free. They will send a free subscription anywhere in the world. It's called Let the Stones Speak. You can look it up. You can get a free subscription anywhere in the world. But biblical archaeology is super important because it's made a lot of progress over the past 100, 150 years. And the more we learn about it, or the more biblical archaeology, the more archaeological finds that are found, the more it seems to back up what we see in the Tanakh. So there are different schools of thought within biblical archaeology. We won't get into all of that right now, but something called the minimalists, where they essentially believe that everything in the Tanakh, all of the stories about the great kingdoms of David and Solomon, are way overblown, and that Jerusalem was a tiny little city, Judea was a tiny little insignificant country, and they tend to look at the Tanakh as propaganda rather than as factual. And then there are those who are the opposite of that, the maximalists, and they tend to start with the Tanakh as an historical document for the most part, and then use the Tanakh to find or to give context to biblical archaeological finds. So at any rate, we're going to talk about one find. Let me just share the screen. That one. That one. Okay, hope you guys can see the screen. And where are we? Oh, did I share the wrong one? Oops, my mistake. I did share the wrong one. Let me unshare. One more second, please. Share screen. Window. No. Is that? Yeah. Let's do it. There we go. Okay. Let me get rid of this so I don't get confused later. And we're going to talk about something called the Merneptah Stele. Let's use, instead of Rabbi Wikipedia, I've only two rabbis that I follow in this world. One's name is Rabbi Wikipedia, and the other one is Rabbi AI. So let's use Rabbi AI. They're the only two rabbis I trust, to be 100% honest. So first of all, let's take a look at this Merneptah Stele. There it is, and a stele, or Stele, I think it's really pronounced, but I always pronounce it stele. So it's basically a large stone with an inscription on it. That's what a stele is. Okay, so we can get a better picture of it. Well, you guys get the idea, right? You can see it. There it is, right there. The Merneptah Stele. And let's learn a bit about it. So we can make this larger. Here we go. So the Merneptah Stele is a black granite slab famous for containing the earliest known extra biblical reference to Israel. So that's what makes it famous. Sometimes it's also called the Israel Stele, as we'll see. Okay, and there it says right there. So also known as the Israel Stele, or the Victory Stele of Merneptah, was discovered by some dude in 1896 at Thebes. Thebes is one of the former capitals of Egypt, meaning of ancient Egypt. It's currently housed in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Boy, would I love to go visit that. I will one of these days make my way down to Egypt and go visit that. Let's see if we can get a good picture of it again. There we go. Okay, so who would like to translate that into English? No, I'm just joking. You're rusty on your hieroglyphics? That's okay, so am I. Okay, the inscription. While the text primarily commemorates Pharaoh Merneptah's victory over the Libyan tribes, the final lines list his campaign in Canaan, in other words, in Israel. So line 27 includes the phrase, Israel is laid waste, its seed is no more. Oh boy, this ask about thing is really driving me crazy. Identification of Israel, crucially, the hieroglyphic symbols used for Israel indicate a people group rather than a specific city or kingdom, unlike the entries for Ashkelon or Gezer. And the historical significance. Whoa. This provides archaeological evidence that a group known as Israel was already established in the Levant by the late 13th century. So let's talk a little bit about dating, and I don't mean finding your future husband or wife. I mean dating history or biblical history specifically. So the kingdom of Solomon is dated to around 1000 BCE. The kingship of Solomon is dated to around 1000 BCE. I think actually the exact date, if I remember correctly, something like 964 BCE or something like that. And there is a statement, I could find it here in, I think it's 1 Kings chapter 6, if my memory serves me correctly. Let me see if I can find it. If not, I'll look it up. 1 Kings chapter 6. Let's see. And it's a very well-known statement in the Tanakh, the Book of Kings, that helps us date. Yeah, it is right at the beginning of Book of 6, the first book of Kings, chapter 6. So it says, I'll just read it in the English to save some time. In the 480th year after the Israelites came out of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, the second month, he began to build the temple of Yahweh. So this helps us date things. So historians have again dated the beginning of the kingdom of Solomon using other means to approximately, I believe it's 960 BCE, give or take. And here, 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1, let me just check it to make sure everything's broadcasting correctly. First King, let's think of someone. Letter R, stay well. Okay. Anywho, so if we're dating the reign of Solomon, the beginning of the reign of Solomon, to around 960, again, I may be off by a couple of years, but essentially 960 BCE. Why be off by a couple of years? Let's look it up. All right, when did the reign of Solomon begin? So 970, let's say, right? So 4 years later, this is 4th year, so we're talking about around 966. So let's just say 970. And then if we subtract 400 years, we go back 480 years, because it says here in 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1, in the 480th year after the Israelites came out of Egypt, so we can rely on this, we subtract, or actually we're going to add, because we're going BC, right? So 970 or 966, let's say, plus 480. So 966 plus 400 is going to bring us to 1366. And then another 80 is going to bring us to 1446. So around 1450 BCE is when the Exodus from Egypt is dated, based on this verse and based on the knowledge of when Solomon's kingdom began. Okay, so what does it say here? So this Merneptah stele is dated to 1208 BCE. So this is 200 years after the Exodus, or 250 years approximately after the Exodus of Israel from Egypt, according to 1 Kings chapter 6. And so we're well into the period of the judges here. Okay, so this is the period of the judges. The period of the kings is usually dated to around, again, give or take, 1000 BCE. That's not exactly right, because David reigned for 40 years, and then before that, Shaul reigned for, I can't remember exactly how many years. So really around 1050 BCE, but this is now well into the period of the judges. Okay, that's what we're talking about. So that means Israel was already established in the land of Israel at this point. Turn on the light in a second. And that's to give context. That's this. ChatGPT again. So, whoa, dive deeper. Don't need that. So, which judge ruled over Israel in the year, what year was it again? For the Merneptah Stele? 1208 BCE, in the year 1208 BCE. Wow, time of Dvorah, Deborah. So in the year 1208 BCE, biblical and historical chronology suggests that Deborah was the judge of Israel. According to various biblical timelines, Deborah's 40-year period of leadership is often placed between 1209 and 1169 BCE. Other historical estimates for her life range, and of course, there's going to be some discrepancy. Okay, at any rate, let's not get bogged down in that. But it was very much in the period of Judges. Okay, so the historical significance of this stele or stele is that this provides archaeological evidence that a group known as Israel was already established in the Levant by the 13th century BCE. Sure. Let's do it. Yes, I do. How do I do this? Let's just say yes, I think. So the Merneptah stele is a cornerstone of biblical archaeology because it provides a specific early timestamp for Israel's presence in Canaan, which directly affects how historians date the Exodus, the hieroglyphics, people versus place. The most significant aspect of the inscription is how Israel is written compared to its neighbors. Egyptian scribes used determinatives, silent symbols at the end of a word to indicate its category. So Ashkelon, so in this Merneptah stele, Ashkelon, Gezer, and Yanoam, which are cities, these names are followed by a throw stick, signifying foreign, and three mountains, a symbol for a city-state or settled land. But when it says Israel, the name is followed by a throw stick plus a sitting man and woman. Whoa, what's going on here? Over three vertical lines. The plural marker. This is the terminative for a people group or ethnic community. Why does this matter? It suggests that by 12,000 or 1208 BCE, the Egyptians viewed Israel as a distinct ethnic identity that was not yet a fixed urban kingdom with a capital city. This aligns with the biblical description of the period of the Judges when Israel was a tribal confederation living in the hill country. All right, let's see if this is relevant here. This is getting too much in the weeds here. And let's not get into that too much. So let's see. Can you provide a translation to English of the stele? So translation of the final stanza, lines 26 to 28. Below is a modern translation of the concluding lines where Israel is mentioned. Again, we're talking about in the Merneptah stele. Let's get another picture of that. Merneptah stele. Right, there's a picture of it, just for reference. So we can make it bigger. Nope. There we go. Good enough. Okay. So the princes are prostrate, saying peace. So again, let's get the context here, right? This was written by the Pharaoh Merneptah. Okay, Pharaoh Merneptah's victory over Libyan tribes. The final lines list his campaigns in Canaan, meaning in Israel. So that's what we're reading here. These are the final lines. So the princes are prostrate, saying peace. No one raises head among the 9 bows. Egypt's traditional. Oh God, I hate this. That's something that pops up. 9 bows. Desolation for Chehenu, Libya. Hatti, the Hittite Empire, is pacified. Plunders Canaan with every evil. Carried off is Ashkelon. Seized upon is Gezer, and Ashkelon and Gezer, these are 2 famous cities. Ashkelon being a Philistine city, and Gezer being a Canaanite city. It may have been settled already by Israelites by then. I'd have to look it up. Am is made non-existent. Israel is laid waste. Its seed is no more. Huru has become a widow because of Egypt. All lands are pacified. Everyone who was restless has been bound. Let's look. Key terms in the translation. The 9 bows, a symbolic term used by Egyptians to represent all of their collective foreign enemies. Israel's laid waste. The word for laid waste suggests total military destruction. Its seed is no more. Most scholars interpret seed as grain or crops, indicating that Merneptah destroyed their food supply. Some older interpretations suggest that seed means offspring, but the agricultural meaning is currently favored, and so on and so forth. Okay? Would you like to explore the Egyptian hieroglyphic symbols for these specific names, or perhaps the Libyan portion of the text? Let's do this. Okay. Explore the Egyptian hieroglyphic symbols for these specific names. Okay, that's already getting too much in the woods. Okay. Well, there we go. All right, that's good. Getting too much in the woods. But let's see if I don't know if this AI does it. Show a zoomed in picture of the part of the Merneptah stele that contains the word Israel. I don't know if it's going to do it. We can try. So it appears on line 27 of the Merneptah stele near the bottom of the artifact. In the close-up images below, you can see the phonetic spelling followed by the people determinative, the small figure. Oh, wow, it's pretty good, this AI. Okay. Sitting over the figures of a man and a woman sitting over 3 vertical strokes. Let's see if we can see it. Let's see if we can see it. I guess this is the best one, right? Man and a woman sitting over 3 vertical strokes. Well, somewhere in there. Okay, so there we go. So we learn about the Merneptah stele. Once again, to summarize, what's important about the Merneptah stele? It's the stele or the Stele that speaks about the victory of the pharaoh Merneptah, who lived during the period of the Judges, dated to 1208 BCE, and it's the first extra biblical mention of the nation of Israel, of the people of Israel. So it's a biblical archaeological find that confirms that there was a people called Israel living in the land of Canaan, because it's mentioned along with these other cities that we saw in Canaan, right? Gezer, Ashkelon. So there we go. That's the Merneptah stele. Hope you enjoyed this little biblical archaeology moment. Any questions or any comments? Let me turn on the lights here. And the heat. It's now evening time in Israel. Any questions, any comments? Okay, and let's go on. We are going to dig into the book of Zechariah. Let's do that right away. And we're in Zechariah chapter 5. We're going to dig in the Hebrew, but let's just get a review for a second. Let's just remember what we were talking about in Zechariah chapter 4, just to get the context. So remember, we saw the image, Zechariah's image of the gold lampstand and the 2 olive trees. Okay. Let's see if we can get that picture back up that we were looking at last week. To see, you get a kind of image is the one we were looking at, right? So it was a vision that Zechariah had, which described it. It was one nice one. Where was it? That one. I don't know if I like that one. All right, that's kind of, let's go for maybe that one. No, it doesn't matter. Okay, let's just pick one. Here we go. Good enough. Okay. So that's the vision that he had. There were 2 olive trees. There were, no, I don't like that one. Hold on. Let me see if I can find that other one. You can see the bowl on that one. Where was that nice one that we used last week? Hold on one second. All right, this one will have to do that. Okay. Right, so we see, you can't even really see it here, but coming out of the olive trees are 2 pipes that are leading into this golden bowl, which then has a bunch of channels that are feeding into the menorah, right? The 7-pronged menorah that is the same as, or that obviously represents a menorah that's found in the holy area of the tent of meeting, of the tabernacle. And then there is olive oil, with golden olive oil that's flowing out of these 2 pipes from these 2 olive trees, and allowing the candelabra, allowing the menorah to be lit, right? So that's what we saw last week. We can read through it very briefly in the English just to do a little bit of repetition, a little memory, and then we'll get into Zechariah chapter 5 in the Hebrew. So then the angel who talked with me returned and woke me up. Like someone awakened from sleep, he asked me, "What do you see?" I answered, "I see a gold lampstand with a bowl at the top and 7 lamps on it, with 7 channels to the lamps, and there are 2 olive trees by it, one on the right of the bowl and the other on its left." Right? Got it? I asked the angel who talked with me, "What are these, my Lord?" He answered, "Do you not know what these are?" "No, my Lord," I replied. So he said to me, "This is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit." Famous verse in the Tanakh. We can actually look at that in Hebrew for a second. So Zechariah chapter 4, verse 6. Right? Lemor, Zedavar Yahweh el Zerubbabel, Lemor. Lo b'chayil, v'lo b'choach, ki im be'ruchi, amar Yahweh Sebaot. Not by strength, or not by, translate chayil. They usually translate strength, but koach also means strength. Not by, let's see how to translate here. Might. Okay, that works. Not by might, not by strength. But rather by my spirit, the Amar Yahweh Tzebaot, says Yahweh of hosts, or Yahweh surrounded by his entourage, right? That's the way we like to translate Yahweh Tzebaot. The Lord of hosts. It's meaningless. Nobody knows what that means. But it's really speaking. Oh, we already spoke about it. I'm going to go back and do it right now. Okay? So, what are you, mighty mountain? Before Zerubbabel, and who's Zerubbabel? He was one of the first returnees, really brought the first group of returnees from the Babylonian, now the Persian exile, back to Judea, back to Israel. Before Zerubbabel, you become level ground. Then he will bring out the capstone to the shouts of bless, God bless it, God bless it. Then the word of Yahweh came to me. The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of his temple. His hands will also complete it. Then you will know that Yahweh Almighty has sent me to you. Who dares despise the day of small things? Since the 7 eyes of the Lord that range through the earth will rejoice when they see the chosen capstone in the hand of Zerubbabel. And we saw last week that the 7 eyes is hearkening back to an earlier prophecy, Zechariah chapter 3, I believe it was, where it speaks about a stone that had 7 eyes on it. Then I asked the angel, what are these 2 olive trees on the right and on the left of the lampstand? Again, I asked him, what are these 2 olive branches besides 2 gold pipes that pour out the golden oil? He replied, do you not know what these are? No, my Lord, I said. So he said, these are the 2 who are anointed to serve the Lord of all the earth. And then referring, according to many commentators, to Zerubbabel and Joshua, the high priest. Okay, let's go on now to Zechariah chapter 5. So that's for review. That's the last, or the previous prophecy that we saw. And now we're going to talk about flying scrolls. In Zechariah chapter 5, we're going to go through it in the Hebrew. And we'll get some good commentary, hopefully. Shabbat Shalom, Christian. So Zechariah chapter 5. Let's dig into the Hebrew. And let's see if we'll do our Robert Alter. I really would like to try to get some other commentators up, but we'll do it next time. Okay. All right. Wa'ashuv. And follow along again if you can, in Hebrew, side by side with English would be the best. And if not, then just in English or whatever language you choose. May I suggest Serbian, if you're looking for language to read. Wink, wink. So I returned and I raised up my eyes, this is a common phrase in the Tanakh, right? Raised up my eyes, lifted up my eyes, meaning something that you know how it is even in our lives today, right? Something's there, but you don't, until you're focused on it, you don't even realize it was there. So that's what this imagery kinds of brings forth. Okay, and I saw, right? I raised my eyes, and then I saw, and then I beheld. Behold, there was a flying scroll. Let's get our picture of our flying scroll. Why not? Flying scroll in Zechariah. All right, I don't know, wings. All right. Okay. Verse 2. Why yomer elai ma ata ro'eh. So who's speaking to him? This angel that has been speaking to him really since chapter 1 is speaking to him again. And he said to me, what do you see? Oops, go up here. Wa Omar ani ro'eh mighila arfa. And he said, I see a flying scroll. Arka asrim ba'ama we rahba eser ba'ama. So it's 20 cubits in length and 10 cubits in width. So cubit is approximately 1.5 feet. So we're talking 30 feet in length by 15 feet in width. So notice the length is double the width, which is very common. We see this in a number of places. So if my memory serves me correctly, when we spoke about the Aron Kodesh, the Ark of the Covenant, don't quote me on it, I'm going by memory, but I believe it's 2 cubits in length and 1 cubit in width and 1 cubit in height. So the width is 1/2 the length. And we see this in a number of things, a number of other pieces of furniture. I believe also, no, that's square. Well, I'd have to look it up. But at any rate, the Ark of the Covenant, if I remember correctly, the height or the length is double the width. Right? So that seems to be a very common kind of, right? We have the golden ratio. So the Greeks believed in the golden ratio, which should be the perfect distance between length and width, which is approximately 1.6. If you've ever taken advanced mathematics, you've learned about the golden ratio and how it's calculated. But the Torah seems to be, or the Tanakh seems to be more interested in the ratio of 2 to 1 from length to width. Okay, verse 3. ויאמר אלי זאת העלה היוצאת על פני כל הארץ. And he said to me, this is the curse. This is the angel again speaking to Zechariah. This is the curse that has gone out al pnei kol haaretz, throughout the entire world, literally on the face of the whole earth. I guess that works in English as well. Al pnei kol haaretz, on the face of the earth. Okay, throughout the face of the earth. Ki kol ha'gonev mizeh kamoha nikah, kol ha'nishba mizeh kamoha nikah. Okay. Let's get a Robert Alter and some commentary on that one. Right, so we translate this: whoever steals as on one side of it has not been condemned, whoever swears as on the other side of it has not been condemned. Okay, so let's see that in the Hebrew. Okay, kol hagonev mizeh kamoha nikah, v'kol hanishba mizeh kamoha nikah. So we have gonev is a thief or one who steals, and nishba is one who swears, but the implication is swears falsely. Okay, so this curse is saying that any thief or anyone who swears falsely has been cleared of their sin. Let's get a little commentary on that. What does that mean? Okay. In fact, let's start from the beginning. So look, a flying scroll. By this point, it is evident that Zechariah's mode of prophecy is essentially different from that of his predecessors. They occasionally experience enigmatic visions that are then explained, but their principal vehicle is direct address. Castigations for trespass, predictions of doom, prophecies of consolation, usually cast in poetry, like, for instance, Isaiah, Jeremiah. Zechariah, by contrast, witnesses a series of puzzling visions, almost like Daniel, shown him by a divine emissary, and they seem to become progressively more bizarre, as this chapter abundantly illustrates. So 20 cubits long and 10 cubits wide. This computes to roughly 33 feet by 17 feet, making this a decidedly supernatural scroll. So it's big. Okay, going out. So this is the word we're talking about here. This is the curse that is going out. Okay. So the verb recurs insistently throughout the visions here. It conveys a sense of mysterious visual objects emerging before the eyes of the prophet, as well as of the agencies of divine judgment or divine scrutiny going out over the land, right? So for instance, in Zechariah chapter 1, we saw, if you remember the vision in Zechariah chapter 1 and Zechariah chapter 1, was there was a horseman sitting by the brook in the myrtle bushes, and behind him were a whole bunch of horsemen with different colored horses. And Zechariah asks, "Who are they?" And then the main horseman says, "These are the ones who have gone out throughout the entire land, throughout the entire world, and saw all of the other nations at rest and at peace." And therefore, the implication is that Jerusalem, Judea, was not at rest or at peace. And then Zechariah asks the angel, "How much longer?" Or is it? I think God says it doesn't matter, but I think God says to the angel, or the angel asks God, "How much longer will Jerusalem not be at rest?" And then God, Yahweh, responds by saying, "My mercy, my zealousness, and my mercy for Jerusalem has grown great." And in other words, it's a prophecy for Yahweh to have mercy on Jerusalem and return the exiles from Persia, from Babylon, now Persia, to Jerusalem. Okay, it's essentially a prophecy for Zerubbabel. Okay, as on one side, as on the other side of it, the Hebrew formulation is terse and somewhat opaque, but the probable sense is that the injunctions against theft and false swearing are written on two sides of the huge scroll, another manifestation of its supernatural character. Until now, the violators of these injunctions have gone scot-free, but that is about to change. The implication. Okay. Okay. All right. Verse 4. Right, so we have this giant scroll, and on one side is all the names of all the thieves are on one side, the names of all those who have sworn falsely are on the other side, but nikah, meaning they have not been punished for their sin. But now let's read verse 4. נאום יחווה צבאות ובעל אל בית הגנה ואל בית הנשבע בשמי לשקר. So let's translate up until that. So I've taken it out, or I brought it out, says Yahweh of hosts, Yahweh surrounded by his entourage. ובא אל בית הגנב ובית הנשבע בשמי לשקר, and it has come into the house of the thief and into the house of the one who is sworn by my name falsely. Kilato et Eitzav et Avanao. So it will then rest within his house. Wakilatu et Eitzav et Avanav, and it will destroy him. It will bring him to an end, as well as the wood and the stones, meaning his house as well, is apparently the implication there. Okay, let's get a little translation and commentary. I brought it out, said the Lord of armies, and it shall enter the house of the thief and the house of him who swears falsely in my name, and lodge within his house, and make an utter end of it with its timbers and with its stones. That's verse 4. Okay, no commentary there, but we get the idea. Okay, so the time of the lack of punishment for the thief, for the person who swears falsely, has now come to the end. The scroll is flying around, it goes into the house of the thief, and that house is destroyed to the foundation. Okay, along with its wood and its stones. That's what houses were made of in ancient times in this area of the world, wood and stones. In fact, we see, for instance, when Solomon builds his palace, it speaks very explicitly about how it was built out of stone and then paneled with cedar wood. Cedar wood was brought down from Lebanon, from Tyre, right, from Tzor, which is just about 2. You can actually see Tzor, you can actually see Tyre from the northern border. If you go to the northern border with Israel, with Lebanon and Israel, and you look north on a clear day, you can actually see the city of Tyre, Tyre. Okay, so that's the end of that prophecy. That's the end of that prophecy. Any other commentary there? No, not really. Okay. Any questions, any comments about that prophecy? All right, then let's go on. Okay, in verse 5. So the angel who was the messenger, the angel who was speaking to me, went out. And he said to me, raise up your eyes. Again, we have that same imagery. Raise up your eyes and see. In other words, cast your attention towards, or raise up your eyes and behold. It's the same words we saw essentially here. I raised up my eyes and I saw. Okay? What is this thing that is going out? Verse 5. Now up to verse 6. Wa omar mahi. And I said, what is it? This is Zechariah now speaking back to the angel. Zot ha'efa hayotzet. And he said, this is the ephah. So what's an ephah? An ephah is, we've spoken about it before, it's a measure. It's a solid volumetric measure. So an ephah of flour, for instance, it would be like a, I don't know, what's the equivalent in English? Like a, how do you measure? Like a bushel? Is that right? Bushel of flour or something like that. So let's go to our Rabbi AI. We're done with Rabbi Wikipedia. He's retired. Now we use Rabbi AI. So how much is an ephah in English measure? Okay, so let's get a little context here. So an ephah is an ancient Hebrew unit of dry measure, equivalent to about 1 English bushel, or more specifically, roughly 0.6 to 1.1 bushels, depending on the source. So it's like a bushel, right? You measure flour with it. You measure, I don't know, grains with it. Here are the standard conversions for an ephah. So the volume, approximately 22 liters. Dry measure, approximately 20 to 24 dry quarts, about 3 pecks. A bushel and a peck, right? My mom used to sing that to me when I was a kid. I love you, a bushel and a peck. Anyway, we get the idea. So when filled with barley, it weighs roughly 35 to 37 pounds. And the biblical context is equivalent to 10 omers, and it's typically used to measure grains and flour. Okay, key takeaways. Ephah, 0.6 to 1 bushel, approximately 22 liters. Okay. So what does it mean? So the way this is usually understood is you can't have a bushel come out. So it usually is a translator interpreted as a basket, right? I think that's the way Robert Alter even does it. Let's see. A measuring basin going out. So he translates it, a measuring basin. Let's get a little commentary on that. So the Hebrew word, so measuring basin, the Hebrew word reads ephah, the most common unit of dried measure, but this object is clearly a receptacle as 1 ephah in capacity. All right. So that's an example of, I think that's an example of, we've spoken about this before. Actually, it might not be. I was going to bring up a certain grammatical term, but I'm going to leave it alone because I'm not sure if it represents that grammatical term. Anyway, so okay, so a basket or some kind of vessel that can hold an ephah of grains or flour. It's going out. Yomer zot einam b'chol haaretz or avunam b'chol haaretz. Excuse me. Zot. No, it makes sense. It does einam. So why is Robert Alter translating it as avunam? Yeah, okay. He's saying it's a scriptural error. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. But what it does say in the Hebrew here is this is their eyes, or this is their appearance throughout all of the land, which doesn't make any sense. So I have to agree with him there. Let's get a little commentary on that. Okay, so for the Robert Alter translation, I said, what is this? And he said, this is a measuring basin going out. And he said, this is their crime throughout all the land. So the word in Hebrew here, as it's written in the Masoretic text, I assume this is based on the Leningrad Codex, is enam, which comes from the word ayin, which means eye, but by extension, it means the look of something, the way something looks to the eye. And so literally what this says here, if we were based it on this text is it means this is the look of everything, zot ainam, or this is their appearance throughout the land. But Robert Alter is saying that he thinks this is a textual error. So the Masoretic text has ainam, their eye, but 2 ancient versions and 1 Hebrew manuscript show the more likely avonam. The ephah then either is associated with their crooked practices using a false measure or indicates a measure of justice that will now be applied to them. Okay. Again, these are that's a bit of speculation, but we'll go with that. All right, so that's verse 6. At any rate, we see this basket that holds an ephah, that holds 20 or so liters of grain, flying out, just like before we saw the scroll that was flying out, that rested in the house of the criminal, the house of the person who swears falsely, and destroyed that house down to its foundation. Knocked down the house along with its wood and stones. All right. Verse 7, more interesting visions of Zechariah. Wahine kikar oferet nis'et. So, and then behold, I saw a talent or a block. How would you translate it? Not a block, a brick of oferet is lead. Anisate that was lifted up, or that what's the word I'm looking for? That levitated. Okay. I saw a brick of lead that was levitating. V'zot isha. 1 second here. Okay. V'zot isha achat yoshevet b'toch ha'ephah. And there was a particular woman that was sitting inside this basket that held the ephah, or that could hold an ephah. So this is a freaky vision. Okay. So we have flying brick of lead. We've got a basket that can hold an ephah, that can hold 20 liters of grain. And then there's a woman sitting in this basket. Some freaky stuff. You know, what was Zechariah on? We could ask we could wonder, right? What was he smoking? All right. Let's go on. Why yomer zot harish'ah v'yishlech ota el toch efa. And he said, this is the evil. And he cast her, he threw her into the basket. Why yishlech et even ha'oferet el piha. And he threw the brick of lead into her mouth. This is some freaky stuff, right? This is crazy, man. This is very rare in the Tanakh, by the way. As we saw, as Robert Alter pointed out, this is not the way most of the other prophets speak. They're not having these wild visions, right? These psychedelic visions almost, okay? And I'm not implying in any way, shape, and form, God forbid, that Zechariah was literally taking something. I'm just saying his visions are pretty wild, right? All right, let's get a little translation and commentary on that. And look, in ingot, I don't even know what an ingot is, but whatever. Let's look up an ingot. I guess it means a brick. A block of steel, gold, silver, or other metal, typically oblong in shape. So there we go. It's basically a brick, like right, like a block of gold or a brick of gold. Okay. So right. So a brick of lead was being lifted, and there was a certain woman seated in the basin, and he said, meaning the angel said, this is wickedness. And he flung her down within the basin and flung the lead stone over its opening. Oh, okay. So they're translating pihas. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. Fair enough. Not into her mouth, although it could be understood that way, into the woman's mouth, but he's saying this is the opening of the basket. Okay, let's get a little commentary. So an ingot of lead was being lifted. This probably means that the ingot of lead was covering the basin. Lead on a measuring basin would make it yield a falsely large weight, and so might be associated with cheating by means of a crooked ephah. Maybe flung the lead stone over the opening. In this fashion, wickedness is now trapped within the basin. Okay, interesting. Let's read that one more time in the Hebrew. Okay, so Mehine Kikar. Okay, so we have, oops, where was it? Yomer Zot Ephah Yotzet Yomer Yotzet Zot Yomer Zot Einam Aretz. Okay, so we've got the flying basket that can hold an ephah. Then we have the flying lead brick. Niset v'zot isha achad yoshevet b'toch ephah. V'zot arisha v'yishlech ota el toch ephah v'yishlech et even ha'oferet el pia. This could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. In fact, it's so interesting. I want to get a couple of other translations here, because I'm not sure I agree with Robert Alter on this one. Let's get a little bit of commentaries, just for the heck of it. Well, this NIV kind of also agrees with Robert Alter. He replied, it's a basket, it's the iniquity of the people throughout the land. Then the cover of the lead was raised, and there in the basket sat a woman. He said, this is wickedness, and he pushed her back into the basket and pushed its lead cover down on it. Let's see what other interesting translations we can get. Iniquity, this is a resemblance. So the King James Bible, not that it means anything, sticks with the original ayin rather than avonam, enam, their resemblance, their appearance. So you notice that some of them are translating it as iniquity, and some are translating it as appearance. So we spoke about that, right? In the Hebrew, it says, in this text here, it says ainam, which means their appearance. But again, we saw that this might be a scribal error, and it really should be avonam. Doesn't matter how that would be written, but that would mean their iniquity rather than their appearance. So half the translations seem to be saying appearance, and half seem to be saying iniquity. Okay, what about verse 7? The cover of the lead was raised. Then the heavy lead cover was lifted off the basket. Cover, there was lifted up a talent of lead. And this is a woman that sits in the midst of the ephah. Here's a lead disc lifted up. The lead cover was lifted up. So most of the translations here tend to agree with that this is speaking about a cover on the basket. right? Basket had a lid made of lead. Net Bible, no, that one. Okay, and the next verse. So the woman's name is Witness, and he pushed her back into the basket and closed the heavy lid again. So that seems to be all in agreement here. Cast the weight of lead upon the mouth thereof. Threw the lead cover over its mouth. Weight, cast the lead weight on its opening. Okay, so it seems to be pretty consistent. Temporary English version, this woman represents evil. The angel explained that then he threw her back into the basket and slammed the heavy cover down tight. Okay, fine. All right, so we've got that vision. Verse 9. So in verse 9. Okay, so so I lifted up my eyes and I saw, again, that same imagery. This is the third time we're seeing this imagery. Behold, two women were going out, flying around. Ruach b'kanfehem, and there was wind in their wings. And they had wings like the wings of this. They're not in modern Hebrew, stork. Yeah, they translate it here as a stork. Okay, so let's get an image of that. So it's Zechariah 5:9. All right, we got some interesting images. Or how about this? Got a woman inside the basket, and then we have two winged women outside the basket. Let's see if we have any other interesting images here. Should we ask AI to make it an image? Let's see if AI can make an image. I don't know. Create an image of Zechariah 5:9. Having fun with AI. Generating image with nano banana too? Okay, wow. Cool. Okay. Interesting. Should we have fun with it? Okay, make the women, I shouldn't do this, black wrappers with large hoop earrings. Okay, I don't know why. I'm in a wacky mood. All right, Nano Banana. Oh my. Okay. There we go. Oh boy. Oh my. And that's Jerusalem in the background. Okay. There you have it. So, right. Radio. So they had the wings. So these two women are carrying the basket. Well, we'll see what they're doing. That's what it says here. So they lifted up the basket. These two women with the wings of storks lifted up the basket between the heavens and the earth. And I said to the angel that was speaking to me, Ana hema where are these? Where are they taking the basket? Vayomer Elai livnot la bayit ba'eret shin'ar mukhan wa hunicha sham al mukhanata So this is it says to build her. I guess it's speaking about the women inside the basket. We'll get to the commentary in a minute. Bayit ba'eretz Shinar, in the land of Shinar. We see the land of Shinar all the way back in the book of Genesis. We'll talk about that in a second. V'uchan ve'unicha sham al mukhanata. And it is already ready. This house is already ready. V'unicha sham al mukhanata. And it will be, and we will place it, or we place there al mukhonata, on its foundation, is the way I would translate this. Let's get some other translations and see what's going on here. Okay, so and I raised my eyes and saw, and look, two women were going out, and there was wind in their wings, and they had the wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted the basin between the earth and the heavens. And I said to the messenger speaking to me, where are they taking the basin? And he said to me, to build a house for it in the land of Shinar, and it shall be founded, and they shall set it down there on its firm place. Okay, let's get another translation. So it's verse 11. So the NIV is, to the country of Babylonia, to build a house for it. When the house is ready, the basket will be set there in its place, etc., etc. Okay. Shinar. So what is this place, Shinar? Let's talk about this for 1 second. Oh, I forgot I could do it split. My new little toy. Oops. One more time. Open and split view. Okay, so in Genesis 10:10, let's go to that for a second, just for the heck of it. Not that it's really relevant, but just to get some context. So let's look at it. So we're going to, whoa, those are two. Let's do another, let's open another window. So Genesis 10:10. Oops. Oh. Okay, so we're getting the descendants of Noah, and then we get to verse 8. So Cush was the father of Nimrod, who became a mighty warrior on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That is why it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The first centers of his kingdom were Babylon, Uruk, Akkad, and Calneh in Shinar, and so on. Okay, so it's mentioned as under the command of Nimrod, this ancient mighty hunter. Let's just look at one more thing here. Yeah, we don't have to get into a whole thing right now. So it's mentioned a bunch of times, right? Okay, let's get rid of that. So, commentary. So, two women, verse 9, the enigma of the woman's vision is compounded. After the woman embodying wickedness, we have two winged women, clearly divine agents and not ordinary women, who are to carry off the basin to build a house for it in the land of Shinar. So Shinar is the archaic name for Babylonia, and the designation used at the beginning of the story of the Tower of Babel. Maybe we should look at that explicitly, right? So 11:2. Now the whole world had one language, a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar, etc., etc. Right? So they built the land, the Tower of Babel, in the land of Shinar. Shinar is the ancient name for Babylon. Many commentators conclude that wickedness is transported to Shinar because that is the location of humankind's transgressive presumption in seeking to build a tower with its top in the heavens. Okay, so they shall set it down. Yeah, so what basically Robert Alt is saying, the language doesn't really make sense in the Masoretic text, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's just a grammatical point which doesn't have to concern us. Okay. So evil. So what's our image again? There it is. That's our image. And they carried off to Babylon. Okay. So that is the book of Zechariah, chapter 5. Any questions, any comments? Anybody? All righty. If so, then we'll take a break for a minute or two, and then we're going to go into Leviticus chapter 25. Very, very interesting stuff. Leviticus chapter 25. So let me put on music for a second, and we will be right back. And we'll start digging into Leviticus chapter 25.
נושם את האוויר, האור והצל משחקים שוב תופסת. השולחן ערוך, תמונות ילדות על הקיר, שיירות לבנות חוזרות מבית כנסת. והריח הזה ששורט לי את הלב, מתגנב ופותח דלתות אל אושר קטן, אל אותו שיר ישן שעובר אצלנו במשך דורות. מתנות קטנות, מישהו שלח לי מתנות קטנות, רסיסים של כוונה, עיגולים של אמונה. מתנות קטנות, מישהו שלח לי מתנות קטנות, כמו הכוח לקבל את מה שאין, את מה שיש, מה עוד אפשר כבר לבקש. זה עוד יום שישי, מרפסת ועיתון, השמש כמו הדאגות לאט נמחקת. מנגינות פשוטות זוחלות מהחלום, ושום שערה כבר לא תסתיר פה את השקט. מתנות קטנות, מישהו שלח לי מתנות קטנות, רסיסים של כוונה, עיגולים של אמונה. מתנות קטנות, מישהו שלח לי מתנות קטנות, כמו הכוח לקבל את מה שאין, את מה שיש, מה עוד אפשר כבר לבקש. מתנות קטנות, כיוונו בחרת ואותנו קידשת, ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. והריח הזה ששורט לי את הלב, מתגנב, ופותח דלתות, אל אושר קטן, אל אותו שיר ישן, שעובר אצלנו במשך דורות. מתנות קטנות, שהוא שלח לי מתנות קטנות, רסיסים של כוונה, עיגולים של אמונה. מתנות קטנות, שהוא שלח לי מתנות קטנות, כמו הכוח לקבל את מה שאין, את מה שיש, מה עוד אפשר כבר לבקש. מתנות קטנות.
Okay, we are back. Okay. All right, let's continue now. We're going to go dig into the book of Leviticus, chapter 25. And let me share the screen. Okay, so we'll get back to the spreadsheet in just a second. Well, let's start here right now. So this is a spreadsheet. I've been working on these spreadsheets for many years, and they have different pieces of information. And one of the pieces of information is the Israel's journeys in the desert. And what people don't realize is that from Exodus chapter 19, which is right before the giving of the Ten Commandments, actually a little bit before, but that's a story in and of itself. Chapter 18, where it speaks about that's the story of Jethro. We'll start with, we'll say 18. No, let's start here. We'll just say it. It's a bit more complicated, but it doesn't matter. It's about this. It's about correct, okay, more or less. So in Exodus chapter 19, so the giving of the Ten Commandments is in Exodus chapter 20. So essentially right before, and the Exodus from Egypt is in Exodus chapter 15, which, by the way, let me make an announcement now before I forget. We are going to do a special study, a Passover study. Let me talk a little bit about Passover before we go on. In fact, in order to do that, yeah, this is important. So let's do this very, very briefly. So give me 1 second here. So here are the holiday dates. Hope you can see them okay. Oh, you can't. I have them on the wrong screen. 1 second. So just 5 minutes, let's talk about Passover. So these are the holiday dates for the first through third months. I think I posted this in the various groups. But Passover, so we have the rabbinical Passover. Let's start with the rabbinical Passover. It starts on Wednesday night, Wednesday, April 1st, and lasts for a week, unless you're in outside of Israel, then it lasts for 8 days, but that's another story. Our Passover, Karaite Passover, starts on Friday. So it starts on Friday night. And the Passover itself ends on Friday night, the following Friday night. So it goes for a week. The first day, meaning Friday night, the first Friday night to Saturday night. So Friday, April 3rd through Saturday, April 4th is a holiday. It's a Mikra Kodesh. It's a day kind of like Shabbat, the day off. And then Thursday, April 9th through Friday, April 10th is also the seventh day. It's also a day off. Okay. Make a long story short, Karaite Passover begins this coming Friday night and ends the following Friday night. Okay. Rabbinical Passover begins this Wednesday night and ends the following Tuesday night. I'm sorry, ends the following Wednesday night. Okay. So Karaite Passover this year is 2 days later than Rabbinical Passover, and that's because the actual visual new moon was observed. Well, it was observed, but also was 30 days after the previous new moon. So this month's new moon was 2 days later than the calculated calendar of the rabbis. So we saw the new moon on Friday, 20th March. And so therefore 2 weeks later, which is Friday, April 3rd, is when Karaite Passover starts, okay? So, and here's the calendar. I've published these on the various groups, on the announcements groups, on the members group, and on a bunch of Facebook groups, okay? There's still time, if you haven't rushed, to order your World Alliance of Qara'im Passover Haggadah. So if you go to the website, worldallianceofqara'im.org, then you can order it. And what I've done is, well, I've sent out the announcements. I don't need to send it out again, but it's something I've worked on for years and years and years and years. And this is the culmination each year. I make a couple of changes and add a couple of things to it. And I think it's really turned out to be something beautiful. I know at least one of our friends here has gotten it. So if you want a Passover Haggadah in the Karaite way, you can order it. You'd have to have it rushed at this point because you have less than a week. But what I did is I made two versions. So there's the hardcover version, which is good for like the leader of the Passover Seder. And then there's a softcover version. It's magazine form. And that could be for each of the participants in Seder. And I can post the two links. And give me 1 second. Let's see if I can find them. So I'll just post this as the Leaders Edition. Give me 1 second, please. And Participants Edition. Okay, so the spacing didn't come out well, but you get the idea, right? So you can go to either one of those links. I'll leave it up on the screen for a couple seconds if you want a Karaite Passover Haggadah to carry on the Passover Seder. So just a couple things. I have in the past done an online Passover Seder, and I hate them. I can't stand them. They never work out well because people like to eat, and it takes a while, and it doesn't work. So I'm not doing it. If you are in Israel and you would like to come up to the Golan Heights, we are going to have a World Alliance of Qara'im Passover Seder here live in Israel in the Golan Heights. You're welcome to join us. It'll be on Friday night, of course, April 3rd. And if not, I hope you'll hold your own Karaite Passover Seder wherever you are. You can either use the Haggadah, or you could just go through verses in the Tanakh if you want. The Haggadah kind of guides you through, so it takes you, because it's a lot of material to cover. The stuff that goes all the way back to Genesis, and then it's essentially 15 chapters of Exodus. So the Haggadah is good because it takes the core stuff and presents it, in a way that you're able to complete the Passover Seder in a couple of hours, right? 1 or 2 or 3 hours, depending on how much discussion you have in between. So that's that. The other thing I want to add is I'm going to do a Passover class. Probably, I'm not sure. I think it's going to be, so Rabbinical Passover is Wednesday night into Thursday. The first day of Rabbinical Passover, I should say, is Wednesday night into Thursday. So that means, back here. Right, so that means that Thursday is a day off in Israel. So that's probably when I'm going to do it. It's almost like a Shabbat here in Israel. It's everyone's going to have the day off. And so it's almost like a Shabbat here, and that'll be a convenient time to do it. So it's probably going to be on Thursday at around the same time that I do the Shabbat studies, but I will send out an announcement, and I'll let everyone know, and that'll be for everybody. That'll be open to the public. And I'll send out an announcement for that. Okay, so that's Passover. We'll talk about a whole bunch of stuff regarding Passover. And it'll probably be a very detailed study like this one. You don't have to tune in for the whole thing. You can tune in for parts of it. But that's the idea. Okay. Any questions, any comments about Passover? If not, then let's dig into Leviticus chapter 25. So we were saying, so this is the list of Israel's journeys in the desert. So it's very interesting. Hold on, there's another cat. Let me let him inside here. Sit next to me. Lavi. Bull. Come, baby. Come, sweetheart. Come, David. Come. Go to your chair. Go to your chair. 1 second, people. There we go. Good boy. Move you. Wait. Sorry. For 1 second. 1 second. One second. There we go. Oh my boy. Come over here. There we go. Good boy. Okay. All right. We got the two cats here. So, right. So it's very interesting. People don't realize this, but Exodus 20, all of Exodus, all of Leviticus, which we're in right now, and through Numbers chapter 10, all takes place at Mount Sinai. Okay? It all takes place at Mount Sinai. The Israelites don't move from Mount Sinai until we get to Numbers chapter 10. So all of Leviticus, everything we saw, the building of the inauguration of the, well, that's in Exodus, inauguration of the tabernacle, the laws about the sacrifices, the death of Nadav and Avihu, the first two sons of Aaron, all the stuff we're learning now, this all takes place at Mount Sinai, or the laws are all given at Mount Sinai. And we see here in Leviticus chapter 25, right? Maybe I should even add this. I'm going to add this to my little list. So Leviticus chapter 25, verse 1. Let's see how we can do this. So set it up a little bit differently. Just add it here. Leviticus. I'll never see it if I do it there. Let me do it this way. Let's see how I'm going to do this. I'm not sure how to do it. I guess I'm not going to be able to do it. All right, I'll just have to keep it off the list because I can't figure out a good way to put it in. But we see here, now we're going to be speaking about the seventh agricultural year in which the land of Israel lies fallow, once we go into the land. And it says, "Vayidaber Yahweh el Moshe b'Har Sinai lemor." So Yahweh spoke to Moses at Har Sinai. You'd think we've already gone through 20 or so chapters of the book of Exodus. We've gone through 25 chapters of the book of Leviticus, and we're still at Har Sinai. We're still at Mount Sinai. The Israelites have not yet moved from Mount Sinai, and they won't do so. We're almost at the end of the book of Leviticus. They won't do so until we get to Numbers 10. Let me just make a note for myself here. Okay, see. Leviticus. Okay, then I'll get back to it later. Okay. Okay, so the Israelites are still at Mount Sinai. Everything we've gone through, we've been studying the book of Leviticus for a year, literally, and we're still at Mount Sinai. Okay, it's kind of amazing when you think about it. So what happens here? And let's get a little commentary on that, maybe. So the mention here of Mount Sinai has become proverbial in Hebrew for a puzzling juxtaposition of two disparate terms. So then Rashi, who's one of the worst Torah commentators ever in the history of Torah commentators, but we'll go through it anyway. What is the connection between Mount Sinai and the year of release? The year of release is what we're going to learn about right now. This means the seventh agricultural year. The most plausible explanation put forth by several recent scholars is that there is an invocation of a Mesopotamian practice in which a king assuming his throne would issue a general proclamation for the release of slaves. Thus, God announcing his kingship at Sinai definitively releases the Israelites from the status of slaves to which they had been reduced in Egypt. They become instead God's slaves, a paradoxical definition of their new freedom at the end, as the end of this chapter pointedly reminds us. Okay, fair enough, maybe. But that's not what we're going to be talking about here. So verse 2, Daber el ben Israel, speak to the children of Israel, Merneptah aleim, and say to them, Ki tavo el haaretz asher ani noten lachem, u'shavta haaretz Shabbat la Yahweh. So this is very interesting. When you come into the land which I am giving to you, of course, meaning the land of Israel, and remember, the land of Israel is still 40 years away. It's still 40 years away. Of course, the Israelites don't know that at this time because the sin that caused the Israelites to be punished by remaining in the desert for 40 years has not yet occurred. That will only occur in the book of Numbers. That's the sin of the spies. We'll get to that in Numbers 16, if I remember correctly. So this is why laws are being given for entering the land, because Yahweh is not expecting, again, we're not going to get into a philosophical discussion about what he knew in advance, what he doesn't know in advance, but it's not yet officially been announced that, or it's not officially happened yet, that the Israelites are going to be wandering for 40 years. So he's preparing them already to enter the land. And so we're getting commandments of what we've already seen some, but we're going to get commandments. We have a commandment here of what you do when you enter the land of Israel, which in Yahweh's eyes at this point is maybe just, I don't know, a month or two off, right? He's planning to take them around a little bit, but lead them right up to the land of Israel. So, Asher ani noten lachem v'shabta ha'aretz Shabbat leYahweh. So the land shall keep a Shabbat to Yahweh. This is very interesting because, as I point out in one of my articles on Karaite Insights, which I'll post a link to in a second, this is only one of three things in the entire Torah that's called Shabbat. There's also, well, let's say what those three things are. So if anyone has been learning with me for a while, you've probably heard this a bunch of times. But the three things in the Torah that are called, that use the word Shabbat, that are called the Shabbat, are number one, the Shabbat, that you guys, if you're in the United States, are in right now, the seventh day of the week. Number two is Yom Kippurim, which we saw in Leviticus chapter 23, just a couple of chapters ago, actually 2 chapters ago. It's called the Shabbat as well, because Yom Kippurim is like a Shabbat. There's a complete, strict cessation of work on Yom Kippurim. You fast, you afflict yourselves, and it's atonement for the temples. We saw in Leviticus chapter 16, and it's like a Shabbat. And the third is this, is the year in which the land of Israel lays fallow. Nothing is planted, nothing is harvested officially. You just pick off the land whatever remained from the previous years. We'll see. So why is this called a Shabbat? Well, let's see what the connection is. And by the way, nothing else anywhere in the entire Torah is ever called a Shabbat. The rabbis mistakenly, boy, they're so stupid, these rabbis sometimes. I'm serious. So they claim, and the reason that I even wrote this article, so you'll see, I'll post the article in a second, is they claim, we saw in Leviticus 23 that the Tnufat Omer, the wave sheaf offering, it's basically the first fruits offering of the barley harvest associated with the Chag HaMatzot, with the festival of unleavened bread. It's in Leviticus chapter 23. We studied it a few weeks ago. So they say, well, it says in Leviticus 23, speaking about this wave sheaf offering, that it's to be brought on the day after the Shabbat, the Machorat HaShabbat, the day after the Shabbat. The rabbis say that this means the day after the first day of Passover. They say that the word Shabbat in Leviticus chapter 23 means the first day of Passover. And I won't go into all the details now because we're going to get too far off track, but there's absolutely in no way, shape or form could the first day of Passover ever be referred to with the word Shabbat. And therefore, when it says in Leviticus 23 that the Omer offering is to be brought on the day after the Shabbat, it could not mean the day after the first day of Passover, i.e. the second day of Passover. It could not possibly mean that, because there are only three things in the entire Torah ever called Shabbat. Number one, the seventh day of the week, the Sabbath day. Number two, Yom Kippurim. And number three, the seventh, I just gave it away. The seventh year in which the land of Israel lies fallow. Okay, I'm going to post that article right now. I hope you'll read it. It will shed a lot of light on this particular topic. Let me just grab it. I can do it this way. Second. One second here. So this will explain it in detail, what I'm talking about right here. Let me post it. Okay, and there you have it. So it's karaiteinsights.com/article/Shavuot. We'll speak about this, what I'm saying right now in detail. Okay. So getting back to Leviticus chapter 25. So this seventh year, we'll see it. We'll see why. This year is called the Shabbat. It's a Shabbat le Yahweh. It's exactly the same phrase that's used in Leviticus 23. In fact, let's bring up Leviticus 23 for juxtaposition. There we go. Some cat activity outside. My two cats are going crazy. Oh, we'll leave it alone. Oh, okay, Shabbat he le Yahweh. It's talking about the seventh day of the week. You really want to go out, Boo? Lavi? Come, baby. All right. Let me let the cat out. He's got to go take care of some cat activity. Go. Go protect your territory. Okay, and we have here in Leviticus chapter 25 that this agricultural year that we're going to talk about is also called the Shabbat Yahweh. The language is being picked up. The language that's used in chapter 20, Leviticus chapter 23, which is speaking about the seventh day, is being picked up deliberately, in my opinion, here to show the relationship between the two. And this is, let me just point out also something that I've spoken about many times. So words in biblical Hebrew, in the Torah, in the Tanakh, in biblical Hebrew, they have what I like to call a base meaning and then an extended meaning. And sometimes they have an extended meaning upon an extended meaning. And sometimes they have an extended meaning upon an extended meaning upon an extended meaning. Or there could be a metaphorical meaning. And then upon that, an allegorical meaning. There are many layers to a word in Hebrew, as there are in I guess, all languages, like in English. The example I always give in English is the word day. So day can mean, the basic meaning of the word day is daytime, when the sun is above the horizon, right? From dawn until dusk. But an extended meaning could mean a 24-hour period, right? So Thursday is the day. Even if it's 11 o'clock at night, it's still Thursday. It's still part of the day known as Thursday. And an extended meaning of that could be an era, like back in the day. Okay? So we have the same in Hebrew, although it's much richer in Hebrew. It occurs a lot more and has often, for many words, many layers to it. So this is the reason I'm bringing this up is in Leviticus chapter 23, when it speaks about the seventh day of the week, that is the Shabbat. That's the base meaning of the word Shabbat. And by the way, it's not to be, if you go to a rabbi, they'll say, oh, well, the first day of Passover is called a Shabbaton. Let's see if we can find it. Second. So here, for instance, Yom Teruah is called a Shabbaton. The word Shabbaton is not the same as the word Shabbat. Okay, a Shabbaton is a resty kind of day. It's an improper noun. The word Shabbat is actually a proper noun. It's the name of the seventh day, just like Bill or Bob or Jim is the name of a person. So Shabbat is actually the name of the seventh day, and that's base meaning is the seventh day. In Leviticus chapter 25, I should say in Leviticus chapter 23, when we speak about Yom Kippurim, the Day of Atonement, you'll see it's also called a Shabbat right here. Okay? So why is it called a Shabbat? Because it's like the seventh day of the week. On the Day of Atonement, on Yom Kippurim, on Yom Kippur, we cease completely from work. We don't do any work on that day. So by extension, it's like the base meaning of Shabbat, which is the seventh day of the week. Since this holiday, Yom Kippurim, unlike the other holidays, which are never called Shabbat, if you read the article, you'll see which may be referred to as Shabbaton, which means a resty kind of day, but it's not a Shabbat. Okay, just like, I don't know, I can't think of an analogy now. Okay, but the Shabbat, Yom Kippurim, it's like the base Shabbat. So this is an extended meaning of this proper name Shabbat. And likewise here, this seventh year, the seventh agricultural year, it's an extended meaning of the base meaning of the word Shabbat. Why is it called a Shabbat? Because, well, let's read on and we shall see. Verse 3. Check and see if any questions or anything. Let's put this down. So, verse 3. Shesh shanim tiz rah sadecha u'shesh shanim tizmor karmecha. Let's translate up to there because there's a semicolon. So for 6 years you shall plant your field, and for 6 years you shall prune your vineyards. Wasafta et tvota, and you shall bring in, you shall ingather its produce, meaning the produce of the land. Tvuratah. Okay, this hey at the end, pinpointed with the dot in the middle, is the possessive tvuratah, and that's the female possessive. And the only female noun here could be the land, ha'aretz. Okay. So at any rate, so for 6 years you plant your field, right? If for 6 years you prune your vineyards, and you gather in the fruit of the land, the produce of the land, for 6 years. Shabbat Shabbaton yi'eh la'aretz, Shabbat liYahweh. And on the 7th year, it is a Shabbat, a day of rest. And by the way, Shabbat, it's a Shabbat, which is a resty-like day, Shabbat Shabbaton. So there is repetition here. Although, again, I want to point out that the word Shabbat is a proper noun, like Bill or Bob or Todd or, I don't know, Mahmoud, or I don't know why I chose that, or Florence, or Waukesha. I don't know, now I'm just being silly. And Shabbaton is not a proper noun. It's a improper noun, like a tree or a dog or a cat or a desk. A Shabbaton means a day on which rest takes place. But Shabbat is a proper noun. It's the name of the holiday. In this case, by extension, it's the name, like Bob or Tim or Dolores. It's the name of the 7th year. Okay? And by the way, the language here is deliberately mimicking the language in Leviticus 23. If we have time, we'll point it out. If not, we'll do it next week. So for 6 years, you shall plant your field, you shall prune your grapevine, and you shall gather in the produce of the land. Wishana Shvi'it, and in the 7th year is the Shabbat, a resty time, or year of rest, or resty year. Yi'eh la'aretz, it shall be a year of rest for the land. Shabbat liYahweh, it is a Shabbat to Yahweh. Again, the same language that we see in Leviticus 23. Okay? When it's speaking about the Shabbat, and in other places when it speaks about the Shabbat. Okay? Shabbat hi li Yahweh. It is a day, it is the Shabbat to Yahweh. Now notice the similarity in language. I want to translate here Leviticus chapter 23, speaking about the 7th day of the week, quote unquote Saturday. Sheshit yamim ta'aseh melacha, u'biyom hashvi'i Shabbat Shabbaton. For 6 days you shall do your work, your tasks, and on the 7th day is a Shabbat, a day of rest. Shabbat Shabbaton. Let's compare this. For 6 years you shall plant your fields and bring in the produce, and on the 7th year is a Shabbat Shabbaton, is a Shabbat, a year of rest. Okay, it's the same language, almost word for word. Yom Shvi'i Shabbat Shabbaton, V'Shana Shvi'i Shabbat Shabbaton. You see it? on the 7th year, or let's start here, Sheish Shanim, for 6 years, you shall do all the stuff, plant your fields, etc. Here, for 6 days, you shall do your work. Okay? In the 7th year, Ubashana Shvi'it, Shabbat Shabbaton. And in the 7th year shall be a Shabbat, a year of rest. And here it says, Bayom Shvi'i, and in the 7th day shall be a Shabbat, a day of rest. It's the same language. The only thing that's replaced is, instead of the word Yom, which means day, it's replaced here with the word Shana. And then the adjective, the 7th, is changed to fit the feminine form. It's the same language. Sheish Shanim, for 6 years. Here, Sheshet Yamim, for 6 days. You'll do, and then it says what you're going to do for those 6 days. And on the 7th day is a Shabbat, Shabbaton. Here, 6 years, you shall do what you need to do. But Shabbat, Shabbat, Shabbaton, and on the 7th day is a Shabbat, a Shabbaton, a day of rest or a year of rest. Okay? So the language is deliberately picking up. And also we saw here, it's called the Shabbat LeYahweh. Here, it's called the Shabbat LeYahweh. Right here. The language is deliberately picking up on Leviticus 23, on the language used in to describe the base Shabbat, the basic Shabbat, or the core Shabbat, the core meaning of the word Shabbat, which is the 7th day. And the Torah is not doing this accidentally, it's doing it on purpose. Remember, the way that the Torah was mostly transmitted in ancient times was through public readings. People did not have their own copies of the Torah. There was no internet. There were no printing presses. If you wanted to have your own Torah, you needed to, as a former teacher of mine used to say, who shall remain nameless, but credit where credit is due, you have to go slaughter an entire flock of sheep, and then you have to turn all of the skins of the sheep into parchment, and then you have to spend about a year or two copying letter by letter, as they do in this day and age, when they make the Torah scrolls, from a copy that already existed. And this costs, in this day and age, if you want to have a Torah scroll written on parchment, it can cost $100,000. Okay, that's why people don't have, unless they're very rich, they don't have Torah scrolls. Now we have printing press, right? Or now we've had it for a while. Now we have the internet. You don't need to do that. But in ancient times, that was the way that information was copied. It was copied by scribes onto parchment or onto papyrus or etched into stone or into clay. Okay, but it was not an easy thing to do. There was you couldn't go to Staples or Kinko's. That's what we had when we were in college. I don't know if it's still around, and run off a bunch of copies. Okay, that's why there's a commandment in the Torah. Let's just find it. Deuteronomy, I believe. Deuteronomy 17:18. The Jewish king is commanded to to acquire a copy of the Torah. Okay, when he sends a throne. Because the king was the judge. Solomon, the first thing he did after he became king was judge. The famous story in the book of Kings where he judges between the two prostitutes, each one who said that the live baby is hers. Kings judged, so they needed a copy, an actual physical copy of the Torah with them. And that's why this is commanded, because it was such a rare thing. So the way that the Torah was transmitted in ancient times to most people was through public readings at the city gate, or once every 7 years, as we shall eventually see, read by the king in the place that God chooses. In other words, in this day and age, in Jerusalem, and they still have that tradition to this day. Believe it or not, every 7 years, believe it or not, on the Shemitah year, the Prime Minister of Israel goes to the Kotel, goes to the Western Wall, and reads from the Torah to the people. At any rate, so the language. So when you hear this language, Israelites hearing this language, if they were listening to to a public reading in the gate of the city, right? They're coming from a day working on the fields, or they're going out to shepherd their flocks, and they stop at the city gates and they hear the Kohen or one of the elders reading aloud the Sefer Torah. This is the way the information was transmitted in ancient times. If they hear this, they're going to know that this language is being deliberately, or it sounds exactly, almost word for word, or very similar to the language in Leviticus 23. In other words, the language here in Leviticus 25, and it's deliberate. It's deliberate. This is a what's the word I'm looking for? I forgot the word. It's a teaching mechanism, right? To deliberately use language that's already familiar from other places in order to relate the two things. And that's exactly what's being done here. So, verse 4. B'shana hashvi'it, Shabbat Shabbaton Ye'el Haaretz. So in the 7th year, it shall be a Shabbat, a year of rest for the land. Shabbat liyahweh. Again, it's a Shabbat liyahweh. That's the name of this year. The name of the year, it's called in modern, already going back to medieval, or I guess already probably back to the times of the Mishnah, if I'm not mistaken. They call it the Shemitah year. But here it's not called the Shemitah year, it's called the Shabbat. It's the Shabbat year, the Sabbath year. In English translations, a lot of times they'll translate it as a sabbatical year, which is, by the way, right, if you work in academia, I don't know if they do it anymore, but back in the day, professors used to get sabbatical years. Sabbatical, Sabbat, Shabbat years. Every 7th year, they got the year off and they can go to some other university or do research, right? That's where it comes from. It comes from Leviticus chapter 25. We'll see a lot of things actually come from Leviticus 25, including that which is written on the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. We'll get to that next week, okay? But this is a Shabbat to Yahweh. So this is now the 3rd time it's being called a Shabbat, right? At least the 3rd time. Let's see. Shabbat Shabbaton Ye'el Haaretz, Shabbat Yahweh. Wait a second. Can I see it once before? Yeah, up here. In verse 2, it's called the Shabbat. In verse 4, it's called the Shabbat twice. So it's important. The Torah is repeating that it's a Shabbat 3 times so far, and there'll be more. Okay? So what do you do in the 7th year? Saltan lo tizra, wa karmacha lo tizmor. So you shall not plant your field, and you shall not prune your grapevines. What does it mean, prune your grapevines? Anyone who knows, we live here in the Golan Heights, there are grapevines all over the place. It's I believe one of the biggest places in Israel, if not the biggest, the region in Israel with the most wine production, grape and wine production in the entire country, if I'm not mistaken. And in the springtime, you prune the grapevines. You have to prune the grapevines in order that the leaves and then ultimately the fruits grow correctly. So they prune the grapevines in the springtime. Okay, that's tizmor. So in the 7th year, and we could talk about, I don't know if we'll get to it this week. We're going to continue this next week. So what does it mean the 7th year? Well, we'll talk about it in a second. We're going to look at something called, or if not this week, then next week, we're going to look at something called the Gezer calendar, which is very relevant to all of this. So what do you do in the 7th year, whatever that means? Et Safiach Tzircha lo tiktzor, wa et Einvei nizrecha lo titzor, Shanat Shabbaton Ye'eh La'aretz. So the leftover, a lot of times we translate this as that which goes on its own of your ktsir. Ktsir is a very specific thing. It's the grain harvest. Okay, so you shall not cut the leftover of your grain harvest. You shall not so you shall not harvest, shall not cut down. They translate as reap, I guess it's a better word. You shall not reap the leftover of your harvest. And the grapes of Nizir is your neglected vines. Lo titzor. You shall not gather. Okay? Shnat Shabbaton Yeh La'aretz. So in other words, whatever's left over also, you're not allowed to ingather. We'll talk about that in a second. In fact, let's get a little bit of commentary on that right now. Let's go back here. So speak to the Israelites, and you shall say to them, when you come into the land that I'm about to give you, the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. 6 years shall you sow your fields, and 6 years shall you prune your vineyard and gather in its yield. And in the 7th year, there shall be an absolute Sabbath for the land. That's the way he translates Shabbat, Shabbaton. A Sabbath to the Lord. Your field you shall not sow, and your vineyard you shall not prune. The aftergrowth of your harvest you shall not reap. And the grapes of your untrimmed vines you shall not pick. There shall be an absolute Sabbath for the land. So what does that mean? Let's find out here. So your vineyard you shall not prune. The vines, of course, do not have to be planted annually like grains, but without annual pruning, they will not yield an adequate crop of grapes. Anyone who's worked with vines knows that. I've grown grapevines in my own life, so I know. So untrimmed vines, a very literal representation of this phrase would be Nazarite vines. So the Hebrew Nazir reflects a root that means to set apart. I would translate it as ignore, because the Nazarite refrains from, among other things, from cutting his hair. The idiom may here be a simple analogical extension from uncut hair because it's forbidden to untrimmed vines. Okay. All right, so what's going on here? Oops. 23. Verse 6. Wa'ita Shabbat ha'aretz lechem la'ochla lecha u'la'avdecha u'la'amatecha u'l'schilcha u'l'toshavcha hagarim imach. Boy, I think I should really continue this next week because it's getting late here. I think we're going to stop here, and we're going to talk about this next week. But this basically says, it's just so beautiful, because just as the Shabbat, oh boy, I'm going to do this next week because it's getting late and this is some really important stuff. But it's the same language being used that we saw in Exodus chapter 20 when it speaks about the Shabbat. Why we keep the Shabbat, meaning the 7th day of the week. Here, the language is being picked up again. And this leftover stuff is this leftover stuff. So when it says you're not supposed to do a formal harvest, meaning you don't take it and sell it. You leave it and then you eat it for your own food, and also for your manservant, your maidservant, your hired worker, and the seasonal worker, or the long-term resident that is living with you. We're going to talk about all this next week, but this is picking up language directly from when it speaks about the Shabbat in Exodus 20. But I don't want to give it short shrift here. I'm going to end, and we'll pick it up here. But this is really, this is one of my favorite chapters in the Tanakh, in the Torah. I don't know why. I've just always really loved the laws here, and I guess because there's so much going on. Okay, we're going to end it here. We're going to pick it up. Let me just make a note for myself that we're starting at verse 6. I'll say verse 5. Just give me 1 second. So, Zechariah. We're starting in chapter 6, I think we're up to. And then Leviticus 25:5. Let me just confirm that that's where we left off in Zechariah. Yeah. So we're going to start actually in 6. Yeah, got it. Cool. So we're going to end here. Any final questions or comments before we sign off? It's getting pretty late here. It's already 8:45, just about, here in Israel. Well, if not, then I'm going to thank you once again for joining us. I'll just plug once again. We're always trying to raise money, or we're trying to raise money now for the World Alliance of Qara'im. We have a whole bunch of plans. So one of the best things you could do to help us out is to join World Alliance of Qara'im, and membership comes with a bunch of, we have special benefits for members, a lot more personal contact. And I hate to do that. Well, I don't hate to do it, but I'm doing it because I have so many inquiries that I have to limit it to those who have shown interest in the World Alliance of Qara'im and in Karaitism. So let me just post that for a second. There we go. There it is. So if you want to officially become a member, then you could do it by going to this website. I'll post it. Okay, so it's patreon.com/join/Karaite Insights. It's that link right at the end. I'll just post the link itself. Okay, there's just the link. And it's a very reasonable fee. About half the donation is about half the amount you would pay for a typical cell phone service in the United States. It really helps us out a lot. This money is not going into my pocket. It's going to fund a lot of projects that we're working on here at the World Alliance of Qara'im. Also, if you tithe, if you give part of your salary each month, then please direct some or all of that towards the World Alliance of Qara'im. We've already started building our community here in Israel, in the Golan Heights, and we need your help to expand it. And we have a whole bunch of, as I said, plans, projects, including setting up a school, setting up a learning center, sending out a regular parsha sheet or a magazine, a bunch of different plans. But in order to do that, we need the help of those who believe in our mission. So please join if you haven't already. And if you have, it's in your heart to donate to us, please do that. Other than that, as I said, we're going to be having a Passover talk probably on Thursday. I'll post information about it during the week. And that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the study. Be'ezrat Yahweh, with the help of Yahweh, we'll be back again next week. And we'll be back before that. We'll be back on Thursday. And that's about all I got for today. So thank you all of everybody for joining us. Wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov wherever you happen to be in the world. And we will talk to you again soon. We'll go out with music, as we always do. So Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. And Shavua Tov.
向东方，远远地眺望西岸山。我们不会失去2000年的希望，在自己国度做个自由民族，住在西安的耶路撒冷，在自己国度做个自由民族，住在西安的耶路撒冷。犹太心灵深处，拥抱着一个渴望。我们的眼睛朝向东方，远远地眺望西岸山。我们不会失去2000年的希望，在自己国度做个自由民族，住在西安和耶路撒冷，在自己国度做个自由民族，住在西安和耶路撒冷。我们不会失去2000年的希望，在自己国度做个自由民族，住在西安和耶路撒冷，在自己国度做个自